Faithful, happy draft week. I'm your 49ers team reporter, Briana Jeannel, sitting down with our digital editor, Brooke Evans, on The Saloon presented by Cisco. Now, we've got a lot of action for you today in this podcast episode. We've got guests from KNBR, ESPN, and there was a lot happening over here at 4949. And so we've got John Lynch doing his opening press conference before the draft. And we've got our guys in the building for phase 1 of OTAs. But Brooke, let's dive just straight into it. Everything that our president of football operations and general manager John Lynch had to say before we kick off the draft.
Yeah.
First off, we've got some exciting news. John Lynch did announce, and he confirmed, that the team has had an agreement with future Hall of Fame left tackle Trent Williams. Now, the team has yet to announce the signing of a contract extension, but great news to hear that there are some agreements there to have Trent be a part of this team for the foreseeable future.
So exciting. And, on that topic, John Lynch did say that it doesn't really change their draft approach. They always expected Trent to be here. So now it's really just about best player available.
That's right. So before we dive into everything draft, it was phase 1 of OTAs. Yep. Just to give the faithful a little bit of context on what phase 1 looks like for the 49ers or across the league, these are voluntary workouts. So the players are not required to be here in the building for those workouts. It's completely up to them whether they want to come in the building or not. There's no penalty there. But John Lynch didn't have an exact number of how many guys on the roster showed up for these workouts because he is super busy with something happening this weekend in the draft. But he did pop in, and our media team was there to see all the guys come in the building. And he said that it was a really good turnout. He didn't have a number for us, but he said, quote, darn near whole. So pretty much the whole team showed up for OTAs this week. Now, let's get into draft. Brooke, what were some of your insights from John Lynch as we work our way to Thursday?
Yeah, also on OTAs, just a lot of smiling faces in the building, too. So it was really good to see all these smiling faces back together.
It feels like football.
It does. It feels like football is right around the corner, which it is. So, but speaking on the presser yesterday, it was really important, the things that he said. And I think we got really good nuggets out of that. Starting with best player available mindset, Lynch made it pretty clear that it doesn't feel like this team has glaring needs. So they're in a position to really just take the best player available as the board falls. Also, he did say that there are fewer true first-round grades this year compared to last. So that can make things really interesting when picking at number 27. But speaking of picking at number 27, we are just slated to pick there. So come draft day, anything can happen. And right now with only 6 picks, he didn't shy away from the idea of possible trades. He's been talking to teams. So saying that we're open to ways to finding more. He said, we don't have a ton of picks. How can we find some more?
Yeah, definitely. So I loved this press conference for the faithful because they got to see what's going on in John Lynch's head before the 49ers actually make the calls come Thursday through Saturday. Right. That doesn't mean that John Lynch is going to put all of their cards out on the table. This is the draft, and you do have to conceal some things. But you got to see a little bit of the mindset that John Lynch is carrying into this draft. With the best guy available at number 27, it's later in the first round, so you're doing a bit of a dance. Honestly, with every single draft pick throughout this draft is that you're dancing between that long-term impact versus that short-term impact. Yeah. A guy who can really have an influence on the game come week 1 when we start over in Australia? Or is this an investment in the 49ers future? Yeah. And this is a guy that they want to develop over the course of a few seasons, and we really see him shine later on in his career. So you never really know when it comes to these picks, but honestly, every team during this draft is trying to find the best guy. Right. And it's going to be a competition amongst 32 teams on who has the better draft portfolio at the end of the day. Yeah. And you don't know that until we've actually seen these guys perform on the field. Right. So it's, a ton of work goes into the analysis of these guys. Our scouting team has worked endlessly to know everything there is to know about these guys and to pick the best guy on the board at number 27. Again, there were a few questions to John Lynch about possible trade scenarios. And again, John Lynch isn't going to share what the 49ers plan is on Thursday. But I feel like we got a few hints there from John. And really, he said that the team is going to stay malleable and that they're going to have an open mindset in this draft. And they're going to be hearing out pretty much everyone. And he thinks that there's going to be a lot of movement this year. He sees teams moving up in the draft, and that could come up as a scenario where maybe a team calls the 49ers, likes their pick, wants to move up. But there might also be a scenario where the 49ers are open to really anything, and if they see fit the opportunity to move up and grab a player that they really like, they're open to doing that.
Yeah.
With that being said, the 49ers only have 6 picks versus 11 last year, so not as much stock to work with. But he thinks, if it does make sense to find some more picks, they'll certainly be open to that. So John Lynch is open to the idea of trading either out of the first round, which it sounds a little bit more realistic with the stock that they have, or possibly moving up if there's a player that they see possibly fall down and they want to go for. So really, I think John Lynch told the media and told the faithful on Monday that we're open to anything.
Yeah.
And so it's a time to, call out to the other teams and be like, hey, my phone is open. My phone is open for Thursday through Saturday. Yeah. So who knows what the 49ers will do, who they will pick at number 27. If they will pick at 27, a lot to look out for as we work our way to Thursday.
Definitely. And then the last thing I also thought was really interesting, a part of this presser, he says that they're using AI to run draft simulations, which I think is so cool, really fitting for Silicon Valley. And he says, to quote, if you aren't using it, you're behind. And I think that's pretty cool to just think about, the ways that we've progressed in the strategy and the form that we're using to build this draft. And all to your points being said as well, is you really never know to get out there on the field, right? So excited to see how this whole draft unfolds and really just to see these new faces come to the building.
Yeah, it sounds like a fun game. I would want to be in the draft room for those draft simulator AI games that they got going on. Imagine you get to have this AI algorithm that's picking as the Cardinals, as the Rams, as whoever, and you get to see the picks that are being made before you, and then you feel the pressure of all the different scenarios that could happen. So they're staying ready so they don't have to get ready this Thursday. And I think that sounds like a lot of fun.
It does.
Also, I want to be in that draft room because Raheem Morris sounds like a time.
Oh, he does. Pool parties left and right.
That's
he was
right.
Just saying
John Lynch was talking about this really fun story of how Raheem Morris contributes to the draft room and sort of the influence that he'll have on the picks that the 49ers make. And he goes, you know what? If a guy is in our building, he is going to have an influence on the picks we make because that is a part of his job. And it's a true team effort when it comes to who is making these picks on draft night. But he's like, you know what? You know why I love Raheem Morris is because he really adds to the room. He never takes away from the room. He has a ton of energy. He's worked with John. He's worked with Kyle in the past. And he's got this one-liner going on. And he's saying, if we draft this guy, I am throwing a pool party. So I'm expecting a ton of pool parties from Raheem this summer. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun seeing what they all do.
Definitely. He seems like a great guy. John Lynch also said he's a bundle of energy. He's curious and he's insightful. Sounds like great things to have as your DC. So super exciting things. We also heard from Barack Purdy and Fred Warner, which was so nice just to see familiar faces back in front of the media again. Again, they were all smiling in good mood. Brock Purdy said that he's feeling in a really good spot physically after dealing with his turf toe injury last season. So always great things to hear that from your franchise quarterback. He also spoke about Mike Evans and how excited he is to work with him. He said, as a quarterback, quote unquote, you dream of those one-on-one opportunities in the red zone.
I loved hearing the story about how he found out the news that Mike Evans was going to be his teammate and how that news broke. So Brock Purdy was working with his tight end George Kittle out in Nashville at George Kittle's own training facility. It's like this barn he's got going on with a ton of workout equipment, and he's got a football field with the George Kittle luchador mask. It is really cool what he's got going on in Nashville. But he was working out with Brock Purdy, and George was scheming up with him. He was like, dude, we've got to add Mike Evans to this offense. How awesome would that be? So it sounds like he was a little bit in the forefront of that,
the behind the works of getting him here.
We definitely know that he was like a closer in that conversation where he was making the call to Mike Evans and telling him how awesome the culture is out here and how awesome that it would be to have him on this team. But Brock Purdy was giving us a little bit behind the scenes of everything that was going on with the signing. But he was actually with George when the news broke. They had the TV up in the barn where they got all the workout equipment, and he saw the news broke, and they were just so hyped to see Mike Evans be a part of their new offense.
Yeah, I mean, what can't Brock Purdy and George Kittle do? They're salesmen now. I mean, I love it. And it doesn't surprise me at all that George Kittle has his friends and connections from all across the country. And it was really cool to hear also Mike Evans speak on how George Kittle had that call with him and really influenced him. He recently spoke on Fred Warner's podcast, The Real Ones, kind of about that and his decision to come here to the Bay, one Bay to another Bay. So definitely go check that one out. It's super cool. But speaking of Fred Warner, he also spoke yesterday. So on the defensive side, Fred Warner is back with no restrictions. We love to hear that. He said he's feeling extremely blessed and ready to jump right into the offseason. Obviously, we're approaching draft, but there's a lot more to come after draft. So seeing these leaders back in the building, really excited to jump in is just all good things.
A healthy Fred Warner. We love to see. He was just talking about how antsy he is to play football and to get back out on there on the field because he went through his recovery all last season. He felt like he was ready to go right towards the tail end of the season. So he's like, guys, I've been itching to get out there on the field for so long. Right. And he's got to wait a little bit for week 1 and we get out there in training camp. I'm sure when pads come on, he's the loudest out there on the field and he is the most excited. Right. I'm sure the whole team is hyped, but once the pads come on, Fred is ready.
Rip it up. Yep.
And it's going to be even more fun this year because he's got his bestie, Dre Greenlaw, with him. So and I loved hearing the story of how Dre gave him the call. We got to hear from Fred Warner's side of the story. Before Dre signed, he called up Fred Warner. He's like, hey, man, I'm back in the Bay, back with my family. And so it's just fun to see all the friendships blossom.
Yeah, so sweet. Fred Warner's going to have to fly all the way down to Australia to finally get his pads back on and really ready to play. But that's right. I'm sure he's just going to absolutely tear it up and so excited to watch them in week 1 and for the rest of the season. But speaking of which, we are in draft week and you just completed your last mock draft. How exciting.
That's right. The final mock draft before the real thing. This was the last Monday. I was, scouring the internet and finding what all the analysts had to say that the 49ers are predicted maybe to do from Thursday to Saturday. And this one is a lot of fun because we've got a few analysts on here who mocked every single pick the 49ers are scheduled to make this weekend. So from round 1 to round 4, we've got NFL.com's Chad Reuter and ESPN's Jordan Reed. They went through the whole slate and they mocked a name for each pick the 49ers are scheduled for. So you know what? I'm just going to run down the list and go through them.
Let's hear
First up, NFL.com's Chad Reuter. At round 1, pick number 27, the 49ers select Caleb Lomu, an offensive tackle out of Utah. Now, we've seen this name sporadically as we work our way into the draft. We talked about him last week and how he'd be a fit on this offense, but a pretty, I would say, consensus pick from analysts across the league. They think we're going to go Caleb Lomu. Should we pick at number 27? Now, in round 2, pick number 58, Jeremy Bernard, a wide receiver out of Alabama. Moving on to round 4, pick number 127, VJ Payne, a safety from Kansas State. Staying in round 4 here, pick number 133, LT Overton, finally, an edge rusher from Alabama. Pick number 138, Jude Bowery, offensive tackle from Boston College. Finally, with the last pick in the NFL draft, pick number 139 back-to-back. 138, 139. But this guy is UR Bernard, a defensive tackle. Now, this one's really interesting because he doesn't have a college. Right there, I was going to say what his college is, but he's actually a part of the NFL's International Player Pathway Program. He's originally from Nigeria, but he performed at the HBCU Combine, and he had an outstanding performance. He broke multiple HBCU Combine records, and so he was really put on the league's status when it comes to draft week.
On some analyst radar there for sure.
That's right.
And he hasn't played a single snap in a football game, so it's kind of crazy.
He hasn't played a single snap of football. However, don't let that get you strayed from how athletic this guy is and how much of a performance he can have on a football field. He's been training. I've seen that he's been watching YouTube videos on all the drills and skills, and so he really showed out at that HBCU Combine in March, and so I'm excited to see where he falls in this draft. Now, ESPN's Jordan Reed, going back up to round 1, here's what Jordan Reed thinks the 49ers are going to do this weekend. Now, round 1, pick number 27, it's Malachi Lawrence, the edge rusher from the University of Central Florida. Now, in round 2, pick number 58, this is one I think George Kittle is going to like. It's a Hawkeye, Jennings Dunker, an offensive guard from Iowa. You know, George loves his O-linemen. Now, moving on to the final 4 picks in round 4. Pick number 127, Charles Dimmings, a cornerback from Stephen F. Austin. Now, pick number 133, we got Cyrus Allen, a wide receiver from Cincinnati. Pick number 138, one John Lynch I think would like, Bud Clark, a safety from TCU. And pick number 139, Demetrius Crownover, Offensive tackle, Texas A&M. All right.
Oh, you got it through.
That was a lot of names, but those are the
That's
picks
exciting.
that a lot of the analysts think the 49ers are going to make this weekend.
I love it. And I love to hear from all our analysts, and they've been doing so much back-end work to really lead up to this draft. And it's exciting because the day is finally here. And we actually have a few guests on the podcast that are going to give us our very last insights before the draft.
That's right. All right, Faithful. Next up, we've got ESPN's Nick Wagner and Guy Haberman from KNBR. Here they are. All right, Faithful, joining us on the Saloon is Nick Wagner from ESPN. Nick, it's draft week. How are you feeling?
Good. Ready to get it going and move on to the next thing.
Right?
That's right. Okay, so first question right off the bat. I want to know, what would you want the 49ers to do at pick number 27 versus what do you think John Lynch is going to do in round one?
Yeah, not that anybody really cares what I want to do, but I think the thing for them, it actually probably aligns with what they're looking to do. And I've been kind of banging this drum for a while where they're in a position they just need to find stars, which is easy to say because everyone does, right? Like everyone in the league wants to draft the best players possible. That's the whole objective. But this is a team, John Lynch was talking about yesterday, that they're not a ton of like really pressing positional needs. But their biggest need to me is figuring out who is the next nucleus of guys that they can build around. Who are the next foundational players? Because you have so many guys, George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey and Trent Williams and all those guys who are closer to the end than they are the beginning of their career. And they have been such a foundational part of this franchise for so long. But eventually you're going to have other guys ready to step in. And I think Brock Purdy obviously is one of those guys that I think Diamador Lenore probably falls into that category. But after that, you're kind of looking for that next generation of guys. And so if they can make that happen and align that with maybe a position that they do somewhat need, and that could be an edge rusher, it could be a receiver, whatever it is, I think that would probably be the ideal scenario. That's a lot easier said than done, particularly when you're picking at number 27, but the draft is such a crapshoot anyway. There's no way to know that. So to me, I think what the Niners will do is probably look for the best player available at position, defensive line, edge rusher specifically, wide receiver, or even offensive line where you start planning for the future and find an heir apparent to Trent Williams.
Yeah. You mentioned yesterday in a tweet the idea of taking someone who maybe might not start right away, like an offensive tackle behind Trent Williams, versus taking someone who might make an impact right away, like, say, an edge. What are the pros and cons of doing either or in those scenarios?
Yeah, I think what you value there is it goes back to the conversation of who can be that next star that, you could find an edge rusher. And I use this example a lot, particularly when it comes to the draft and you're drafting toward the end of the round, because if you're drafting there, a lot of times positional value becomes such a big part of the conversation. And so teams value edge rushers and tackles and wide receivers so much that when you're drafting that late, you might get the 7th or 8th best guy at that position. Now, that's just what it looks like on paper. They could turn out to be the best, which is what the ideal scenario is. Or you may end up drafting a safety or a guard who could be the first or second best guy at that position. And then you have to kind of factor in where that positional value plays into that. So I think the 49ers are in an interesting spot just because they obviously want to compete this year. Everything that they've done to this point in the offseason tells you that they're ready to compete this year. So you have to figure, what type of contribution are we going to get from this guy? And does it come at the expense of a guy who maybe isn't going to play a lot, but long-term will have more value to us and could be one of those guys that I was just talking about where he is a foundational player, a left tackle? You heard John Lynch use the phrase premium position, talking about offensive tackle a few times yesterday. And so to me, I think those are kind of the things that you have to weigh. And I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer as long as you're getting the best guy. But so much of that is, how does he project? How much can our coaching staff, how much do we believe in our coaching staff to get the best out of this guy and our scheme? The Niners obviously are in a really good position in terms of the coaching staff, so they have to feel good about whoever they bring in. But those are all the factors that kind of go into the pot that you have to figure out. And, oh, by the way, there's 26 teams in front of you that could throw off any plan that you have going in, which also makes it really difficult to discern.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, look at all the stars on our team that were drafted either in the 5th round or later. So you never know the value that they have on draft day versus what could turn out over the course of a few seasons. Now, I want to talk about the chances of a trade scenario in the 1st round. Say the 49ers are flexible and they can move either up or possibly out of round 1. What are the chances there, and how would that impact the significance of the picks that the 49ers make?
Yeah, I think certainly, you're John Lynch talking about they have to be kind of malleable, I think is the word he used. A good word, by the way. But talking about just being able to go either way. But my read on the situation is because Lynch referred to it a couple times, it's not a secret. They only have 6 picks. I think they'd probably like to have a few more. I know for a fact they would like to get a 3rd round pick, get back into those kind of middle rounds, because a lot of people you talk to around the league tell you that this draft is maybe not super deep in 1st round guys, but 2nd and 3rd and 4th round guys. There's a big clump of guys. So the more picks that you have in there, the better. Obviously, they traded their 3rd round pick for a defensive tackle who should help them a lot this year. But I think moving down would be an ideal scenario. But again, it comes back to, what does a team want? Who do teams want to come up to get? Generally, you'll see, there's a quarterback. If we want to get a guy who's maybe a 2nd round quarterback prospect, but you can move back into the 1st round, it gives you a 5th round option on that guy. And I will say, in this draft, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of quarterbacks that are going to go very high. Fernando Mendoza, we know, is going to go number 1. After that, Ty Simpson from Alabama is considered like a late 1st round pick, early 2nd round pick. You've got 3 teams, the Dolphins, the Cardinals, who am I missing here off the top of my head? The Jets. Those are teams that could be in the mix for a quarterback and may need to leapfrog each other. So I think maybe there's something that could come into play there. I don't know how willing the Niners would be to do a trade in the division, but something like that I don't think would be outrageous. Wouldn't be that unusual. So I think that's their best bet and their best hope to find something like that. And I think it would be ideal, just because you heard John Lynch say it. It's less than 20, the number of players they have with 1st round grades. The chances of one of the guys who has a 1st round grade making it to number 27 are probably pretty slim. And so if you're going to be drafting a guy that you have graded as a 2nd rounder, you'd probably prefer to draft him in the 2nd round, particularly if you can add more draft capital on top of that.
Right. And, in this offseason during free agency, we had a successful free agency where we're adding a lot of guys here. We had a lot of guys return. And given the state of this roster and how this team is built right now, what's something that would actually surprise you come Thursday night?
Oh, boy. What would surprise me? I don't get surprised by a lot anymore. I've been doing this for a long time.
It's the NFL draft.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be surprised if they moved up. I would say if they traded up. No, that's not. It wouldn't be outrageous. If they moved up more than like a couple spots, let's say, I would be surprised by. Again, just going back to the lack of draft capital. But like I just said a minute ago, if they only have, let's say, 16, 15 guys with a 1st round grade, and one of those guys happens to linger to 23 or 24, and there's a big gap between who that player is and who may be next on your board, or that the options you would be looking at if you stayed at 27, you can't rule it out. I never say never, but I guess I would be a little bit surprised if they moved up, because it would be a two-factor surprise. One, that they moved up, but 2, because it would mean somebody that we weren't expecting to fall probably fell into that range too.
All right. Well, you've shared, as we worked our way up to the draft, that the 49ers are well positioned to add a wide receiver during this draft class. What qualities are the 49ers looking for in a wide receiver draft pick that already wasn't added during the offseason, like Mike Evans or Christian Kirk? So what type of qualities are in this new guy that possibly might get drafted?
I think, to me, the word that comes to mind is juice. They need speed, and that doesn't mean a guy who runs a 4.2 40 or a 4.3 40. That stuff is all fine and dandy, but it is, how quickly can you separate? Can you create separation at the top of your route? Those types of things that give them an opportunity to get yards after catch. As we know, this offense is built around a lot of that, and it hasn't been there the last couple of years. That hasn't prevented them from being productive. But I think when you look at the way the offense is set up right now, that's something that's lacking, is just that kind of top end speed, a guy who can catch, a 15-yard dig route and turn it into a 70-yard touchdown. That, I think, that would be something that they would really like. like. And honestly, again, this kind of goes back to the beginning of our conversation here, where you have to start thinking about the future a little bit. Christian Kirk is here on a 1-year deal. Mike Evans signed a 4-year deal, but effectively it's a 1-year deal, and they can kind of figure it out from there. But you don't necessarily have the long-term options at that position either. And so that's really what a lot of this is. And I know it's so easy to get caught up in who is the guy that can help right away and win you a Super Bowl. Picking at 27, it's just hard to find that anyway. It's hard to find it in the draft period, but picking that late, it's hard anyway. So if you can find a guy like, Indiana's Omar Cooper, I think is a guy that's really interesting because of the different ways he can be used. We've seen the 49ers have success with Deebo Samuel, who is the guy that he gets compared to a lot. And the nice thing about that is you can get him the ball in different ways. He doesn't just have to be a slot receiver or an X receiver. He can, you can put him in the backfield even, or you can do all kinds of different things where he can give you short-term impact, but the long-term impact would be even greater. And so I think just finding some speed, finding some juice at wide receiver would give them a different element, and kind of open things up a little bit more for some of the other guys underneath too.
All right. Investing in the future. Nick, thank you so much for all of your expert 49ers and draft insight. We appreciate you coming on, and happy draft week.
Yeah, you too. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Now joining us on the Saloon is our guy, Habes. Guy Haberman from KNBR is joining us now. Habes, how are you? And happy draft week.
Bree, great to see you. I need your nickname, since you're calling me Habes now. And
It's Bree.
It's Bree, the nickname.
Bree and Brooke.
Or you call us B&B.
B&B, I like that.
Okay, done.
Beautiful. Now, I want to hear your thoughts on this offseason, some of the wins that John Lynch pulled into the 4949.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think the first wins was like seeing Fred Warner on Monday talking about how no restrictions, right? And George Kittle looking like things are going well for him. And obviously Trent Williams coming back into the fold and having another full off season of health for Brock Purdy and all that. Osa Odigizua, I think, is definitely the headliner on defense, and Mike Evans the headliner on offense. Like, those are big time headliners. I love the way Kyle Shanahan said at the league meetings, like, guys who've been there before definitely still have something in the tank. Odigizua definitely has something still in the tank, like a big time player. And Mike Evans, the beauty of Mike Evans is his game has not, even though he came in the league a very fast player, but he doesn't have to have separation in order to make big time plays. The Niners always are near the top of the league in kind of explosive plays, but they're not necessarily straight line down the sideline balls. And maybe Mike Evans can bring some of that too.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a little bit our leaders that have gotten healthy in the offseason. The offseason is so important when it comes to recovery, and we've had so many great positive updates on injuries and health. Just kind of given the state of where we're at now, what do you make of it, and maybe some of the crazy workouts we've seen happening in the offseason?
I mean, it's, the McCaffrey.
Yeah.
I'm not
right.
That one, that's one of those, when you get tricked by AI videos and then sometimes you see a real video and you're like, no, what is that? What is that?
It's Christian McCaffrey being Christian McCaffrey.
So, he's at the top of the list of workload every offseason. We talk about it. Every season we talk about it. It's so easy to say, well, maybe a few less touches this time around. And then you get into the games and you go, how could he have less touches? He's the best player on the field. And he's another guy, like, as the year went on, he just got better and better and better. So, his health is obviously paramount, but getting Dre Greenlaw, I mean, we didn't mention him, right? If he has a healthy season, what an add that is. So it's the same story every year. It was obviously the big story last year. It's that story. It's that way around the league with everybody. Like, can you be healthy enough to allow your best players, the top half of your roster, to be the difference makers that they are? Because these guys have such significant difference makers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we all know Christian McCaffrey is AI. He's not human. It came out when we saw the screws going in his head during that one playoff game. But definitely fun to see all of the guys getting back into true form and seeing their health come along as we work our way to the 2026 season. But as we transition from 2025 to 2026, Habes, it is draft week. What do you think are some of the biggest needs the 49ers need to address this Thursday through Saturday?
Can't have enough D-line. I mean, that's always the case, and that's definitely on the list. But edge is tough. Edge is tough late in the first round. I know, Bree, you talked to Daniel Jeremiah. the other day, and I saw he said this week that there's going to be a run on receivers and offensive linemen, which it always feels like there's a run on offensive linemen. The good news is that the receiver group is pretty deep, and there are some players that can help. And we know that the Niners love to, they love to kick the tires on receivers, sometimes in the first round, sometimes later. So I think that's another position that you probably can't have enough of, given, Christian Kirk is in, and Ricky Pearsall, when healthy, was one of the best receivers in the league last year. Mike Evans, because of the age, you have to be ready for a game or two. So you can definitely solidify that position. Safety, always. It's not a quote-unquote premium position. I know John Lynch had a laugh about that in his press conference on Monday, because it's not viewed as a quote-unquote, it's not edge rusher or left tackle. But the second you have a game-changing safety, it changes everything. So another linebacker is definitely on my list too, and a guard. Now, I know they feel like they've solidified the offensive line, and they have, but I think we've seen the last couple of years a guard, somebody who can play some tackle in the future, right? Maybe 3 years from now, if Trent Williams isn't back 3 years from now. But that's a long way out. But, I think left guard is definitely a top priority, and that's not necessarily a first-round pick. And the good news is the Niners have shown an ability to get guards with value who can play right away in those sort of middle rounds.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of fun things to unfold come draft this Thursday. But given that the players were back in 4-9 yesterday, and the state of what this team, this roster is now, where do you think the identity lies? What's the identity of this team, given we have so many new guys coming in for free agency and old guys returning?
Say we had to play a game this Sunday.
Right.
Yeah, or in another time zone or 18 hours away, right?
Who knows?
Who knows? But I think it's interesting, right? 2 years ago, it was coming off of a Super Bowl. How do you handle that? Then it was coming off of a long off season, and you get sort of much needed rest. And now hopefully what it is the happy medium of the hunger that comes with not winning a championship, but the inspiration that comes with knowing you proved something last year, you accomplished something last year that was a signal of overcoming adversity, defying the odds, all that sort of stuff. And they weren't a team that had no expectations last year. They had huge expectations coming into the year, as they always do. But, I think that's kind of an interesting mix of like this team, especially what they did in the regular season was awesome. Everything kind of got put over the top after winning in Philadelphia. And obviously the way it ended in Seattle was really frustrating and disappointing. And so you always end, however it ends, if it doesn't end with a Lombardi, with the sour taste in your mouth, but that was particularly sour. But to me, the identity is a group of guys who they're hungry to do it, and they know what it takes, and they still have the capability, right? And that's called being in your prime. Like, those are guys that are in their prime. And so I think that's, to me, that's the identity, is like a team that's been so close, prove they still have a push in them last year, and hopefully they're inspired to give it a deep run again.
Mm-hmm. All right. Even though the draft is our Super Bowl for our scouting team and for our front office, the 49ers won't be playing a game this weekend. But tell me about your excitement for the 2026 season and what we've got cooking up for a great season ahead, the 80th season.
The 80th season.
The 80th anniversary.
The 80th anniversary. How great is that logo? The Niners have always had some awesome, like anniversary logos. And obviously with Jerry, 80 is very special. An Australia trip, a Mexico trip. I think just a really good schedule. Like last year coming into the season was a good schedule because people thought it was the easiest schedule in the league. This year's a good schedule for another reason. This year's a good schedule because you're like, God, these are... every week you're playing headline opponents. So I don't know. I think, I get very excited for the draft. I get very excited for the schedule release. We know who you're playing, but to me, the primetime kind of slate is what really is intriguing. And there's, you don't need an excuse to put the Niners on primetime. But when you're playing the Cowboys, that helps. Now, what's that going to end up? On Monday or Sunday afternoon, there'll definitely be a battle for that game. So that to me is just like every week. It's so cliche. It's a heavyweight fight, and every game this team plays, in particular, this franchise, at home or on the road, is a primetime game, officially or unofficially. But this year, I think there's going to be a lot of really premium games. Definitely,
and we're really excited over here as well. But giving back to the draft and just kind of looking ahead in this 2026 season, what's one thing that's going to decide how far this team goes, that X factor?
You mean other than health, Brooke?
Yes, other than health.
Start with that. I think the thing that I've come into the last 2 years thinking about, and I think it applies again this year, and it applies really every year, because we see now, like Tom Brady was a great example, quarterbacks in particular evolve as they age. When you're in your prime, you're still getting better. Like, think of anybody, you two, me, everybody. Like, if you're still in competition, you are trying to improve. And so for me, one of the big stories every year is you've got this, he's still young, now entering his physical prime franchise quarterback. What incremental improvements can Brock Purdy make this year? You know, to get from where any guy starts to where Purdy is, there's 32 starters, kind of, you know. Mike Sando's tiers list comes out, and usually half of those guys are on teams that are trying to replace him. So it's really like 15 quarterbacks in a given year that have reached that little, you know, that exclusive top of the mountain. Yeah. And that's really hard to beat 99.8%, I guess, of everybody else. And then what becomes really hard is once you're kind of there, how do you get just a little bit better? How do you get 1% better? And that's where the margins are really thin. And that's one drive at the end of a must-win game. And that's one throw. And that's the fourth quarter of the playoffs in the cold or the rain. Like, that's where we really start. And so I just get so excited the last few years for, you know, the chances, because you don't get many games, to see Brock Purdy in those situations, and how he continues to improve, trying to get into those situations and succeed in those situations. I just read Seth Wickersham's book called American Kings. It's the biography of the quarterback. Is excellent. And I mean, the quarterback position is without a doubt the most interesting thing in all of sports, because the margins are so thin, and all the ways it can go wrong, there's so many. And all the ways that go right, there's so few. And so when you get a guy who's your guy year in and year out, like Brock Purdy is for the 49ers, it's the best drama there is.
Yeah, and he can Dougie. What can't he do, right?
That's 100% right, always, for Brock Purdy, is hitting the Dougie. Sweet, Guy. Thank you so much for all of your insight on the 49ers and the draft as we work our way closer to the 2026 season. It should be a fun one, and we're excited to see more of you.
All right, Brooke, enjoy the draft.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of Saloon. It's the last one that we have leading up to the draft. So make sure you guys stay tuned for all our draft coverage. We're going to have exclusive interviews, articles, and more coming all to you.
That's right. We're going to be talking with every guy that gets drafted to the 49ers, and you don't want to miss it. So make sure you subscribe to The Saloon on YouTube, SiriusXM, and all your favorite podcast platforms. We'll see you here very soon. Stay tuned and go Niners.